Do you agree with this? It just seemed like the failure of that album just sucked all the momentum out of John Sykes.
Total. And I just challenged Nikki Sixx to, get up on the stage with me. See who's better. That night, when I talked about that effect in the paper, the effect didn't work that night.
Okay.
So I said to Bob Daisley, you think she would screw up the show to try and make me look bad? And Bob said, oh, definitely. Blue Murder, I thought, you kidding me? This album's going to go all the way. And Marcy Free told me a couple of months ago that she's very pissed off that she did that. I was supposed to be in The Who after Keith Moon died.
Keith Moon.
I was supposed to be in Led Zeppelin after John Bonham died. A couple of years later, I get a call from Gene and Paul. What about this guy, Vinnie Cassano? I said, what about him? He said, we're thinking of putting him in Kiss. I said, he's trouble. On the road with Rod Stewart, just finding out our song went to #1 all around the world. For the Love of Money was my idea. I was doing that with King Cobra. Can I curse on this thing?
Yes, please. Fuck.
Okay, they're going to say, fuck that, Carmine Appice. What the fuck is he now? People would say to me, who's better, you or Vinnie? I just say, I'm the original.
The hair metal guru from Warren to Crew. The hair metal guru. Never forget Charlie too.
Hey, today, wow, I get to welcome Carmine Appice to the show. Carmine Appice, who played with Vanilla Fudge, Cactus, Rod Stewart, Ozzy, Pink Floyd, King Cobra, and Blue Murder. He influenced John Bonham and Neil Peart, and he's still playing shows with Vanilla Fudge. And I just have to say, I don't get nervous doing interviews, but holy shit, Carmine Appice is here. Carmine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I say I'm influencing a couple of dead guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, but we were just saying, like, shoot, you got hair. I mean, you're still out playing and stuff. I mean, man, you're doing well for where you're at.
For an old guy.
I was trying not to say that. I was trying not to say
I know. I said it. It's okay.
Okay. Hey, I don't know how the hell you interview someone who's been in the music business for almost 60 years and has done everything there is to possibly do, but I'll start here. Your brother, Vinnie, is 11 years younger than you. He played with Sabbath.
Yeah.
You must have been in a pretty supportive family for you guys to go out and accomplish what you've accomplished.
Well, I helped him, My parents were always supportive.
Yeah.
My mother used to sing around the house. My father didn't play anything or nothing, but I used to sing harmony in Brooklyn, like in vocal groups, so I did that. But I had a cousin that played drums, so when he played drums, we'd have parties and I'd go over his house and I'd play, on his drums. And little by little, I got a drum set. And then, when Vinnie grew up, he kept watching me on the Ed Sullivan Show and all the TV shows and at the Fillmore and all this stuff. So he was ready to rock. So I noticed that he had talent, and I sent him immediately to the drum teacher I had because he was really great.
Yeah. And
by the time Vinnie was 13, he was awesome. We used to sit around and say, let's cop some Billy Cobham licks, and we do it together,
Did you guys ever get like later on when he was in bands and you were in bands? Did you guys ever get competitive? Like, hey, your band sucks and my band rules, or anything like that?
Oh no, not like that. But we did our Drum Wars show, and we did an album.
Yep.
And we did some touring all around the world doing that, and it was a lot of fun.
Sure.
There was no competition there because people would say to me, "Who's better, you or Vinnie?" I just say, "I'm the original."
Yeah. Right.
Right. But Vinnie's is a great drummer.
What would you say is, and this will be my last question about this, what would you say is different between your style and Vinnie's?
Well, Vinnie's totally heavy metal.
Yeah.
It's all that, like the Dio kind of heavy metal. But I play everything.
Right.
I play everything. I mean, look at my resume. Vinnie would never play with Pink Floyd.
Right.
Or Rod Stewart.
Right.
But he can do it.
Sure.
He just don't want to do it. He used to say on his website, you know, blah, 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 and no ballads. And I said, no ballad. And I used to say, no work, you know, but, you know, he did great, really good for himself. And,
Sure.
you know, I have my studio here that I do a lot of stuff. Right now I'm doing a new Cactus album
Right.
we did one last year. It was called Temple of Blues, and I got all the great people on it. And Joe Bonamassa, Warren Haynes, and Billy Sheehan, and I can't even remember everybody. Steve Stevens,
Shit.
guys from King Cobra. So we're doing it again because it hit the Billboard charts last year on the blues charts at #3, first week, and it was on the charts for a while.
Right.
So Cleopatra Records said, let's do another one because the owner, it was his idea to do it.
Sure.
It's called Temple of Blues, Influences and Friends, and it's people who are influenced by Cactus, you know, which is a lot of people. And so we're doing another one. I just heard the new solo that my buddy Alex Solpnick from Testament just did an amazing guitar track.
Wow.
You know,
Alex Solpnick is on this?
Yeah, Alex is on it. I got him. I got Eric. I don't know if you know who Eric. Oh gosh, I forgot his last name. Eric Gales.
Eric Gales. Yep, I know him.
He's on it. Yeah, he's on it.
Oh.
And Pat Travis is on it, and Billy Sheehan's on it, and Derek Serenian, Joel Turner, Steve Morse, a whole bunch of people. And we did 3 Cactus songs. Last album we did all the Cactus songs, about 3. So this album we did 3 Cactus songs, and the rest of the album is Howlin' Wolf songs done heavy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Really?
And when it comes out, I gotta get your copy to play. You'll love it.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Speaking of Cactus, I was listening to "Let Me Swim."
Oh yeah.
You got to know the influence on Van Halen Eruption, right?
Oh, that's Eruption.
Right. It is.
And what about the song Parchment Farm? That's Hot to Teacher.
Right. Right. I mean, I knew Eddie grew up listening to the shit out of Cactus, but I didn't know it was as blatant.
Yeah, it's blatant. I never heard in the days when they came out, I was with Rod, so I never really had time to listen to the radio and see what was happening. But you know, after a while, and not a long while, I used to hear about this thing, Eruption.
Yeah.
And when I heard it, I said, "Oh my God, that's the intro for Swim."
Yeah.
You know, so on this Cactus album we did last year, we had Doug Aldrich on it and Malcolm Mendoza.
Yeah.
And I did the intro longer. I said, Doug, just do your thing, man.
Yeah.
So he did it. We were brown. He's doing all that fast, cool stuff. Then went blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Then we went into the song. So I wanted it to blatantly sound like Eruption.
Right.
So we can talk about it in the interviews, which I did. You know?
That's
and
awesome.
it's amazing. But you should listen to that. So what is it called? Temple of Blues, Let Me Swim with Doug Aldrich.
I got it. Okay.
Cactus. And you'll hear it. We really extended it.
Okay.
And, you know, Doug's a monster player. So
totally.
Yeah.
Played with everybody.
Yeah, he did.
I was just watching you with Vanilla Fudge playing "Keep Me Hanging On the Ed Sullivan Show." I
was an animal.
It's 1968, and you're spinning sticks and putting on a show. Where did that come from? Because nobody was doing that before you.
Well, originally, Dino Danelli from the Rascals was like an idol, and he was doing some nice spins, but in those days, there were no PAs, so you really had to beat the hell out of the drums.
Yeah.
And Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich were my idols. And Gene Krupa was a showman. So I tried to be a showman, but I was playing really hard because there were no amplifiers, no monitors, nothing. So I used to beat the hell out of the drums. If you see the Shotgun, which is another one on the Ed Sullivan Show, it's on YouTube.
Yep.
The end of my solo is just like rock and roll.
Yeah.
You know, and this was like 5-6 years before, you know, and the drums I got, those drums are the same drums I got for Bonzo on that show. And you can see I'm raising my hands and I'm beating the hell out of it. That's why I had 2 rotator cuff surgeries.
How can you still play?
I still play, but I get achy after I play.
Sure.
You know, my age, you know, I'm 78 years old,
Yeah.
you know, and not easy to play this stuff. But I don't play as good as I used to do, you know. I mean,
Sure, but
like nobody did. But
no.
like I'm doing a song called "Feel So Good" from the first Cactus album. On that was a drum solo of mine, which is a freaking animalistic, and
Right.
especially for those days, nobody was playing like that, you know.
Right.
And there was like Ginger Baker, he was more laid back. There was Mitch Mitchell, who's played jazzy, and Keith Moon.
Yep.
But really, that was it, you know, in those days.
Right.
Bonzo wasn't out yet, you know. Ian Pace was just starting out,
Right.
you know. But we were, you know, the four drummers I say that influenced a lot of people. And
Yeah.
Dino Denali was one of them too. But, you know, but I listened to that solo. I said, oh my God, I'm not going to do that again on this record. So I got different idea. I'm going to do like a little guitar battle with Tommy Thayer and Britt Lightning.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and then we're going to do a drum percussion, kind of like the middle of Whole Lot of Love, but with all drums. And I got a theremin I'm going to use, and
Okay.
I think Billy Sheena's going to play it on that one. I'm going to get him to do some of the Tim Bogert fuzz tone bass stuff in there,
Sure.
and you know, I might have an orchestra, I might have some vocalization, you know, and just make it really spacey, psychedelic,
Right.
you know, for like 48 bars, and then go into the end of the song and end it. So we're gonna make it interesting instead of
Sure.
just a drum solo, you know.
Sure.
And I do everything I record here in my studio.
Amazing. You know, we kind of talked a little bit about Vanilla Fudge. You released, that was your first big band. You released
Yeah.
5 albums with them. Like what led to the end of that?
Me and Tim wanted to play with Jeff Beck,
Okay.
and Jeff wanted to play with us.
Right.
And ever since we did a Coca-Cola commercial, not a Coke commercial, we did a Coca-Cola commercial, and our guitar player was Sykx. So Jeff came in and sat in with us because we had the same attorney, and we paid Jeff $300 for the session. You know, it's
Right.
pretty funny.
Right.
But once me and Tim played with him, it was like, wow. So it was either BBA with Mark Stein or Vanilla Fudge with Jeff Beck.
Okay.
You know? But it was fun. So we met him and we talked to him, and you know, we always wanted to play with him. Then one day we played a gig with Led Zeppelin. It was actually Edwin Hawkins Singers was the opening act, and 10 years after, then Jeff Beck group, and then Vanilla Fudge. We topped the bill. But
Right.
on that show, Led Zeppelin went up and jammed with Jeff Beck group. I mean, how do you follow that?
Right.
You know, so we, you know, we did okay, but you know, guitar music was coming in, and the organ thing was getting played out,
Sure.
and that was the night Jeff Beck told John Bonham, Jeff Beck wants to play with you and Tim. Here's his number.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were all old friends. You know, it's like
Sure.
people think now, oh, Led Zeppelin. You know, nobody was ever friends with Led Zeppelin. You know, if you see that Led Zeppelin movie, you must have saw it.
No shit. And I need to, because
Yeah, because I'm in it.
damn.
Robert Plant talks about how Vanilla Fudge took them under our wing and took them on tour. And he talks about how I influenced John and how good friends we were, and we used to hang out together. And then it shows a clip from the Ed Sullivan Show of me,
Right.
nobody else,
Right.
you know. So I tried to get I tried to get Robert to sing on this album with Cactus. The word back was, yeah, he wants to do it. But, you know, I'm waiting 6 weeks already for a call.
Sure.
You know, if he does, I'll do a whole new song.
Right.
You know,
Right.
for him.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. You know, it's like English musicians are a bit different than the Americans. Let's put it that way.
Right. So you did play with Jeff Beck. You did Cactus.
Yes.
But how did Rod Stewart end up getting you to join his band?
Well, it's funny because when I was with Jeff Beck, BBA, we broke up, and I hung out with Jeff in England for 3 months, and we started what was to be the Blow by Blow record.
Right.
And I was on it, and it didn't work out. And if it did work out, I thought of this lately, I would have been with Jeff Beck, and I wouldn't have been with Rod, because Jeff was touring on that album, and I was living in LA, and a friend of mine, Sandy Gennaro, that played with Joan Jett and a few other people, the drummer. I said, "Hey, Sandy, how you doing?" He goes, "I'm good." And I said, "What's up?" Because I just came from a Rod Stewart audition. I said, "Oh, it's great." He said, "I didn't get it." He said, "You should call him."
Right.
I said, and I know Rod. We did 30 shows with Cactus and Faces, and we had the same attorney as Jeff Beck Group, and so I called him, and he said, I said to him, "Hey, Pete," I said, "Rod's looking for a drummer. You don't call me. You're in LA. You don't call me." He goes, "Well, you're always busy." I said, "I'm not busy now. I would love to play with Rod because I love Rod. At the time, he was the best front man. He had the most original voice of anybody.
Yes.
I think Zeppelin was based after the Jeff Beck Group.
Right.
And so he said, "Okay, so let me call Rod." So they called me back. He said, "They're playing. The band is over Rod's house in Beverly Hills. Why don't you go over there and check it out, see if you like it?" I said, "Wow, that's interesting. That's different."
Yeah.
So I knew Rod, So I went over there, and I knew some of the guys. When I was in England doing that Blow by Blow, the bass player on that album was Phil Chen. He was in the Rod band.
Yeah.
And the guitarist Jim Cregan was a guy that I knew from England because we did some shows with John Lord and Ian Pace and all that. We played a few nights at the London Palladium. So while I was there, I knew this guy. So I went in and I knew two of the guys, and the other two guys were cool. And we went in and we jammed. We did rock and roll, and it was like great. So then the next day, Rod called and Pete called me and said, "Well, Rod's coming in town. If you like it." What happened to my thing here?
Oh,
there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. So Rod's coming back in town. So why don't you come up and have a play with Rod and the band? I said, "Great." So I went up, and it was great. I thought I was cool. I had a Pantera at the time, right? I had a couple of really. I was always a car guy.
Yeah.
So I had an old Jag, looked like a Rolls Royce, had a Pantera. So I figured I'll take the Pantera to Rod's house because, I pull into his big gates, pull up in his Lamborghinis, his Ferraris, there's all kinds of cars. I said, "Oh my God," So, but anyway, so Rod was there, and we had a play, and he said, "It's up to you, man. What do you think?" I said, "Man, I'd love to play with you guys." He says, "Okay." He says, "You're in." He said, "Just play like you did in Cactus. You'll do a solo every night. I know you have fans.
Yep.
And let's go." So we did, and I was there 7 years, and it brought my career way up.
Right.
Way up. So I wrote "Do You Think I'm Sexy" and "Young Turks." I co-wrote. And, so I started getting these royalties like I never had before.
Yeah.
And then we went out on the road. He was a good guy. This was like, it wasn't like it is now, like it's just Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
It was the Rod Stewart group.
Right.
When we went on the road, we had a percentage of the take, and it was awesome. It was great. I still love the guy. I do a show now called Tonight's the Night. The show to create some music and legacy of Rod Stewart. I got a guy who looks like Rod. I got Rod's sax player, and we go out and play theaters, and we do really well. And
I
go ahead.
Oh, I saw the dates for that Rod Stewart thing on your website. Your website will be in the description. You mentioned that you co-wrote two of his biggest damn hits. "Do You Think I'm Sexy?"
I know. It's funny, right?
Go ahead.
No, I was just to say it's funny, drummer writing. I co-wrote with my buddy Dwayne Hitchens. He's a great songwriter. He wrote "Infatuation" with Rod after I was gone, and he wrote for Steve Perry and a whole bunch of other guys there. But he's a great talent, and he's been a friend of mine forever. And I brought him out to LA and started him in the business there. He was when we broke up Cactus to go with Jeff Beck. We gave Dwayne, because he was in the second version of Cactus, we gave him the name to go out and make some money with. And he had another version of Cactus.
Okay.
And then that didn't happen. And then I brought him out to LA, and he's great. At the time, David Foster was just a session guy.
Yeah.
He was making $100,000 a year. And I said, "Man, you can come out here. You're as good as him."
Yeah.
So he stayed in my house and a month or so, and And he got himself going, and that's his history. He made a lot of money. He wrote a lot of songs. So we did this with him.
Yeah.
And, I remember we were in Australia. We used to go out with the band and a dinner every night. And so we took everybody, the crew, everything. And Rod said, look, you got a #1 record in the States. Let's chip in and buy everybody dinner.
Yeah.
And I'm not used to that. At the time, I wasn't used to that.
Yeah.
I made money, but not that kind of money.
Right.
I mean, this is like huge money,
Yeah.
And that was it. And in the end, this guy, one of the guys in the band, was jealous of me because Rod used to say, I'm like the name guy. You're second under me.
Yep.
And so we used to do interviews. I would do the local radio interviews, and he'd do the nationwide stuff like Rolling Stone and
Yep.
People Magazine and nationwide news. And I would do the local stuff, and this other guy didn't like it. So those were the days of doing a lot of coke and all that. So I didn't do that stuff. So
I was
he
I was
was
gonna ask.
he was so this guy was right up Rod's butt,
Okay.
and he got me fired.
Wow, that's so. Because I was thinking Rod's got to be desperate to keep you around. You're writing a couple of his biggest hits.
Well, that's what I thought, but it was just one of those things, when they're drinking together and drugging together, first look, I love Rod. He's still a good friend of mine.
Yep.
And I don't remember, we were pissed off at each other when that happened, but I had a solo album coming out on his label.
Right.
Which is funny enough.
Yeah.
And he used to say things in interviews. How can you trust a drummer with his name on the drums? And I said, what the frick does that mean?
Right.
But the name on the drums gave me a lot of fame because he always sat right in the middle of my bass drums.
Sure.
There's always Carmine Appice on each side. So it was good. But I love the guy. He's still a really good guy. Even when I told him we're doing this, we got Catcher who plays sax with him in the show. And I said, look, I don't want to call it a tribute because I'm in it.
Yeah.
And I want to call it the show that creates the music and legacy of Rod Stewart.
Right.
What do you think? And he said, wow, I'm honored.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I'm honored. You said I'm honored. But he's a great guy. And he's still going. He's 80 years old. And look, he's not like we were when we were 25,
right.
But he's still out there doing it because he loves doing it.
Yep.
And God bless him, man. Like I say to myself too, I'm going to do it till I can't do it no more.
As you were part of Rod Stewart's band in 1978, you drum, and I'm a huge Kiss fan. And so you drum on Paul Stanley's 1978 solo album. What do you recall about that period? How did Paul get a hold of you to work on that?
Well, I got the gold record behind me for that, platinum record.
Right.
Actually, when I joined Rod, I knew Paul and Gene and Kiss from when they first did their first big tour. I opened up for them with Leslie West Band.
Okay.
So me and Leslie West and Mick Jones. How about that?
From Foreigner.
Yes, he was in the band.
Yes.
And Kenny Aronson was their bass player.
Okay.
And it was a great band. So I got to know these guys.
Yep.
And so then I moved to LA and I was playing with Rod and I ran into Paul somewhere and we started hanging out. Started really hanging out. And then he would love Rod, so I would invite him to the parties that Rod had and stuff like that. And then funny stories with this. That's when they all wore the makeup.
Yeah.
So I had that big old white Jaguar, looked like a Rolls Royce. I went with Paul. We went to see Angel when they were big.
Yeah.
And they had all the stage show and they're playing the Long Beach Arena. So I went with Paul. So we went and say hi to them. Then we're waiting in front, waiting to them go on. And we're about 15, 20 rows back. And we're standing there waiting. We're talking to each other. So I noticed that these fans are like looking over at us, And I'm saying, oh, man, they must recognize you, Paul. And he said, I don't know. So then they come over and they recognize me. They didn't recognize him because he wore the makeup.
Right.
Yeah. All these stories are in my book, stick book. And then the funny other thing we did was we went to yeah, I hung out a lot with Paul. That's how I ended up on the album.
Sure.
Yeah, and I needed mufflers on the Jag. We were hanging. I said, Paul, I got to go to Midas Muffler. You want to come? Yeah. So he went. So we're hanging out there. The guy's looking at the mechanics are looking at me. The guy at the desk goes, "Hey, you guys in the band?" I go, "Yeah, we play." They say,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I play." The guy says, "Yeah, I play too." So me and Paul look at each other and we laugh, and then we waited for the thing to be ready and we left. We said, that guy should only know who was in his
Yeah.
his muffler shop,
When
So
when Peter left,
yeah,
there ever any like, hey,
yeah. Well, there was rumors that I was Paul hooked me up as a manager to be not me, but to get his manager.
yep,
You know,
yep,
Bill Coin.
yeah,
So they signed me, and I said, "So what do we do?" He said, "We're going to make you a celebrity." I
okay,
said, "How are you going to do that?" He goes, "You watch me," and they did. I got a lot of press all over the place. So when they did that thing at the park,
Kiss Me
that
the Phantom,
yeah, I was there. I was hanging out with Paul and the guys backstage and all that. And then when Peter what left or whatever happened, we were talking about maybe I should join Kiss.
yeah,
But then Gene said, "No, we should get somebody brand new. It'd be better getting somebody brand new." And I said, "Okay,"
okay,
But I was in Rod's band anyway,
yeah, yeah,
you
right,
know, so it didn't matter. Just like I was in the Who. I was supposed to be in the Who after Keith Moon died.
Keith Moon,
I was supposed to be in Led Zeppelin after John Bonham died. It's all these rumors. Matter
right,
of fact, with Rod, there was a rumor that I was going to join Led Zeppelin. He was going to retire, so we were on the road together. And he said, "Hey, are you joining Led Zeppelin?" I said, "Not that I know of." I said, "I know there's a lot of rumors." He said, "Good, let's keep the rumor going." Because I got a rumor going that I'm going to retire after this tour. We'll sell more tickets.
right, right.
I said, "Okay."
It was the first farewell tour,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
So it was great working with Rod. It's fun working with Paul. When they played down here, I'm in Florida. I called them. They took care of me. I brought a buddy of mine with me.
Sure.
And they took great care of me. And backstage, hung out with them. And talk, so I know Eric for a long time, and I know Gene and Paul a long time.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's when they're telling me, "Yeah, this is going to be the last one." Paul saying, "Look at Gene walking in those big boots. He can't even walk in them anymore." I said,
Right.
I get it, dude. We're the same. I'm actually older. We're in the same area,
Yeah. Right.
And
Speaking of being associated with Kiss, you and Vinnie Vincent,
oh my God.
and I gotta ask, and I'm sorry, I know you, but I gotta ask. So
Go ahead.
can you just tell me, it was called Carmine and the Rockers, and
Yeah.
this is before Vinnie's.
Ooh, you've done your homework.
Oh man, yes, I have researched and done my homework because,
Right.
and I mean your story and shit with you. There's a lot of homework to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about Carmine and the Rockers and
Well,
Vinnie Vincent?
okay. So, it was like the 80s, all new wave stuff was happening. I always like to try and be on it, like what's happening. So, I don't know who came first. I think it was Vinny came first.
Okay.
I don't even know how I met him, but I met him, and then he got this guy, Zero. His name was Cyril. I said, "Dude, you can't have a name like Cyril in the band. Let's call you Zero."
Right.
That's when the Police were just coming out, and Sting. I said, "Zero's cool
Yep.
for a bass player."
Yep.
So, and we got this guitar player named Eddie something. I said, "It's good." Oh, Eddie Spaghetti. Let's call you Eddie Spaghetti. So he was Eddie Spaghetti,
Okay.
and I was me, and he was Vinny Cassato,
Yeah.
because that was an okay name. And then it's funny. So I used to goof with him because I used to with Rod. We used to wear some eye makeup in those days,
Sure.
So he would do the eye makeup on himself and take forever. So I used to call him Vinny Girl, right?
Right.
So it was all cool. So then the Kiss guys called me after, we did we did demos. We were ready to sign a record deal, and we were all splitting writing. You know, he was a good writer. I was a good writer, and the other guys wrote. And you know, so we said let's split all the writing.
Yeah.
So because he had a couple of more songs than everybody else, he said, "No, I don't want to do that. I want all my songs. Anything I was to do with, I want my share." I said, "Come on, dude, you're gonna blow this record deal."
Yeah.
So he blew the record deal.
Right.
So I told him, you know what? Go take a hike. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to work with somebody who's an egomaniac, you know.
Right.
So he left. A couple of years later, I get a call from Gene and Paul. What about this guy, Vinnie Cassano? I said, what about him? He said, we're thinking of putting him in Kiss. I said, he's trouble. He's trouble. I said, how bad? So I told him, he goes, well, you know, so they basically thought they could handle it. So,
Yeah.
so they brought him in, and I got to admit, you know, he was great with them.
Yeah.
He was great with them because he was a great guitarist.
Yeah.
And a good singer, and a good writer.
Yeah.
You know, I still got tapes of us, and later, like a couple of years ago when he came back,
Yeah.
I was talking to him as I was supposed to do a gig with him.
Yes.
You know, and then I said, yeah, I got these tapes, man. They really sound good. You might want to hear them. Maybe we could release them. You know, release them at the gig. No, I don't want to do that. No way, no way. I said, okay, no problem. You know, so, you know, then he did what he did to us to Kiss, and they fired him.
Right.
And then he did that Vinnie Vincent Invasion. I thought that was the worst bunch of crap I ever heard with him playing. Knowing him, he's a great guitar player.
Right.
He was trying to be Yngwie,
Yeah.
and it was horrible. And the
Yeah.
mixes were horrible.
Yeah.
The guitar was so loud,
Yes.
you couldn't hear the drums. You could vaguely hear the singing.
Yeah.
You know, and it did okay, you know, because he was in Kiss.
Yeah.
You know, and then he did another one, whatever he did. And then when he disappeared, I knew his wife. I knew he had twin girls. You know, I knew the whole family. Then I heard that twin girls were murdered, or his wife was murdered, or some crazy thing. Then he disappeared. Then he comes back looking like a woman,
Yes.
right? And I laughed at the fact, hey, Vinnie girl, hurry up with your makeup.
Right.
You know, but you know, I mean, this is all the truth. I'm not trying to belittle him or you know, put him down or anything. So it's probably going to have some fans that are watching this and going to go, "Oh, freak him."
Yeah.
Can I curse? Can I curse on this thing?
Yes, please. Fuck.
Okay, they're going to say, "Fuck that, Carmine Appice. What the fuck does he know? He's fucking played out anyway."
Yeah.
Like the fight I had with fucking Vince Neil.
Yeah.
Not Vince Neil. What did I have to fight with? Motley Crue. Nikki Sixx.
Nikki Sixx.
Who was a fucking good friend of mine. You know?
Yeah.
And he's over there putting me down, saying I'm washed up and everything. You know, okay, I don't play arenas, but hey, I got a great life. I've had a great life.
When did that Nikki Sixx thing happen?
I think it was 24 or 23.
And he was okay. Maybe I don't know about this. So he was.
Oh man, how can you miss that? It was all over the internet.
Fuck, I
Just
don't
put
know.
in Google. Can you be on the computer while you talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, Google Carmine Appice and Nikki Sixx.
Okay.
See what comes up. It was unbelievable. It's because Mick Mars told me that they do stuff with tapes.
Yeah.
Right? And then I did an interview with somebody about Jeff Beck because he passed away. And they said, what do you think of Mick leaving Motley Crue? I said, well, you know, he told me he wasn't happy there anyway because they played with tapes.
Yes.
That
Okay.
started the whole thing. All
I
that stuff
remember
they
that.
want afterwards. That started it for
Okay.
me. You know? And then it went on and on and on. And you know, and I just challenged Nikki Sixx to get up on the stage with me and
Yeah.
see who's better. You know?
There's no fucking way they're not playing with tapes.
Oh, no kidding. I mean, no
it's-
kidding.
It's so blatantly obvious.
I mean, Mick went on the Metal Show
Yeah.
and he told Eddie Trunk that years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the big deal was, but you know, I got to say, Nikki gave me a lot of free press.
Yeah.
I made a shirt up that I sell. Like I do these diary shows, like
Yeah.
my history diary show, and I wrote, I made a shirt up that says "Six sucks"
I need
with like a one of those smiley faces with like a frown.
right,
You know,
right.
it's freaking funny.
Oh man, if you're still selling those, I'm getting one totally.
I think I might have some.
Okay. So
But anyways, it's been crazy stuff. I mean, my life took so many crazy turns with people that I knew. I mean, I used to go to breakfast with Nikki. He lived around the corner for me.
Yeah.
At least he could have called me up. I still got his number in my phone. He probably has my number. He could have called me and said, "Hey, dude, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
Don't stop putting me down in the press. Ridiculous.
Yep. But it seems like that's where battles happen nowadays, is not face to face,
I know.
on social media.
Yeah, I know. But I don't mind. It gave me a lot of press. Everybody was talking about it.
Sure.
Except you.
Yeah. Well, now that I looked, I was like, oh shit. Okay, now I remember. Fuck, I'm starting to lose my memory too.
Yeah, me too.
Hey,
Excuse
while
me,
we're
what
at
was your
it,
name? What was your name again?
it's Anthony. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you mean
Um,
Anthony? Anthony.
Anthony. Yeah, do you know Steve Conte?
Yeah, I know Steve.
So I just interviewed him, and he kind of has that Italian, and he was
Yeah.
calling me Anthony too. So
Yeah, that's New York, Anthony.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of Vinnie Vincent, you almost did something with him in 2019.
Yeah.
Was shit.
Yeah. I had a guy. This guy calls me and says, "Hey, Carmine, this is Derek. I'm doing some shows with Vinnie Vincent, and I'm wondering if you would play with him." I don't hold grudges.
Sure.
I said, "Yeah, I play with him." I mean, I call people who I know, for years. I see how they're doing, because we're all getting older. It's like, yeah, I'll play with him. Where's he going to do it? He said, "Well, I don't know yet. So what would it cost for you to do it?" So I gave him a price. He said, "Okay, that's reasonable." He said, "Who's going to play bass?" He said, "No, I don't know." I said, "Let's get Tony Franklin."
Mhm.
So I called Tony. He said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So me and Tony were ready to do it. We put the dates aside, and then he ripped his promoter off. He ripped the promoter off. The promoter gave him some deposit money, and then he ain't doing the gig, so give it back. He didn't give it back. He gave him a bunch of posters to sell.
Okay. Okay.
And then I see he's doing these ridiculous Vinnie Vincent shows where people are paying $5,000. I said, "What, are you kidding me?"
Yeah. And the guy,
Crazy.
he's planned so many things that he's backed out of,
Yeah, and he probably kept the money.
and probably kept the money.
Yeah. It's sad. It's sad because he was never like that when I was with him. I mean, he used to, did his thing, but he never was blatant, like that,
Right. Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody's to each its own,
Yep. In '83, you join Ozzy for the Bark at the Moon tour. Did you play on that album, or did you?
I was an associate producer on the album.
Okay.
Which was, you got to read my book. All this stuff's in there.
I'm
Anyway,
ordering it tonight.
I was in at night '83. I was the spokesperson for this new electronic drum called Symphonic Drums. It was me and Buddy Rich, and Buddy was my idol, and I was pleased to be there with him. And so I was in France doing some sort of convention with it, and I got a call from Sharon, from my manager. My manager said, "Sharon's looking for you." I said, "What did I do?" So can I give you a number? I said, "Sure." She called me and said, "We fired Tommy Aldridge. We're doing this album. We fired Tommy Aldridge. And we know that you know how to get a good drum sound kind of thing. And we want to know if you want to join the band and help us finish the album in New York." So she said, "Where are you now?" I said, "I'm in France." "Where are you?" "I'm in London." So she said, "Can you come to London and play with the band and see how it goes?" And, I knew Jakey Lee from LA. I knew Don Airy from different projects. I knew Bob Daisley, from Rainbow. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll come." So I went over. We had a jam. We played. It was a lot of fun. It was great. We played, some of the first and second album.
Yep.
And And then we went for a drink and everything. She says, so do you want to do it? Yeah, okay. But, you know, we have to finish the album. So she basically hired me to go with Ozzy to New York to help him finish the album. He had to finish vocals. We had to fix the drum sound because the drum sound that Tommy Aldridge had on that record wasn't very good.
Okay.
So basically, Tony Bon Jovi was John Bon Jovi's cousin.
Yeah.
I worked with him in New York with Vanilla Fudge years ago in '69. And since then, he became really big. He had the Power Station, I think it's the Power Station studio.
Yep.
So we did it there. And, you know, we'd go walk from the hotel to the Power Station studio. I don't know, it was a few blocks. And Ozzy would go out wearing diamond rings and fur coats. I said, dude, take those diamond rings off. You want to get freaking mugged? You're in New York City, you know? So I'd walk with him every day, and we'd fix the drum sound. We re-mic'd the drums and everything. And when we did the video, me and Ozzy flew on the supersonic jet, you know, to London, you know, and 3 hours we got there, and then I did Bark at the Moon. I played to Tommy Aldridge's drums,
Yeah.
but I got the drum sound, and then I had an associate producer's credit on the album because I was there with Tony. We're doing Ozzy's vocals like 3 or 4 words at a time.
Yeah.
You know, and we did it. We finished it. Came out, and the first 500,000 albums, you'll see my name as associate producer.
Okay.
And then when she fired me, because my name was too big, she said, her words, your name is too big, you need to start your own band. Because when I was on the road with them, I'd been doing this before. I would do drum clinics, master classes in every market. You know, I had a really big selling drum book. I had the first rock drum book that any rocker ever did. I did the first drum clinics. I did a lot of these things that I've been doing for years. So in my deal with her, I had my own merch and a contract.
Yeah.
With my manager, you know, because, you know, my name was pretty rock and roll in the 80s, you know? And so I had my own merch, and I was able to do these masterclasses. I didn't do any in Europe. When we came to America, I did, if we did like a week, we do 4 or 5 shows, I'd do 4 or 5 masterclasses.
Sure.
And it was always cash, and I used to give the cash to the tour accountant that had a safe on the bus.
Yeah.
And she didn't like that. And I'd get press, because I had a press, my own PR person, and like, you know, she hated it, you know, she hated it.
Right.
And I would, like one time in Cleveland, I had a full page of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which is the big newspaper, talking about me and talking about the clinics, talking about me and Ozzy. Then in that, it said, what's the biggest effect on the tour? And I said, well, I guess it's the drum show, the drum solo, because it's like a drum show. The stairs open up, and the drums go from way up 15 feet in the air, and the second level up all the way to the front of the stage on a track where I do my solo, and I do glowing drumsticks and get the people chanting with me, you know, like I always do. I get the people, like Rod said to me, he said, I know your drum solo, when I come back on stage, you're going to have the people riled up. I said, that's right. So we're doing the same thing. Except that night, when I talked about that effect in the paper, the effect didn't work that night.
Okay.
So I said to Bob Daisley, you think she would screw up the show to try and make me look bad? I mean, it didn't hurt me at all. I still got the audience doing the same stuff.
Right.
And Bob said, oh, definitely.
Wow.
So that's what kind of people we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
You know, she ripped off, you know, Bob told me she ripped the whole band off, Blizzard of Oz band. That was supposed to be a band.
Yeah.
You know, and Bob, they sued her, and somehow they won. I don't know how they did that. I sued her, you know, but I can't talk about it.
Sure.
You know?
What was the conversation when she was like, you're out?
This was her face, like this. Your name is too big. No, actually, it started off with Tommy Aldridge was hanging around. And she said, you know, you saw Tommy hanging? She said, yeah, well, he's starting the tour Monday. I said, what do you mean I'm starting the tour? I got a contract. She goes, so?
Right.
So you got a contract. So you already asked your roadie if he'd stay on. He's loyal to you. He won't stay on.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So now I got my drums here. How do I get my drums back? You flew my drums here. You
Yeah.
need to fly him back. So no, let Andre drive it. Rent a truck and let him drive it. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm dealing with here. So, so I rented a truck. He drove it back. I got a lawyer and we sued him. And then Ozzy, it's not Ozzy at all.
Yeah.
Because when I did get King Cobra together, which was great, I got my own band, King Cobra.
Yep.
Got a big deal on Capitol, big deal merchandise and all that.
Yep.
And I went out and I bought a truck because I learned from Ted Nugent, don't rent these things.
Yeah.
I bought a truck. I bought a mobile home, so I didn't have to rent a bus. And I was in the studio, Mate's recording studio.
Yeah.
And I was there with the truck and the band. We were rehearsing. I bought a stage set, all this stuff. So I'm over there taping up the windows so we could paint it white. I wanted the truck white, the motorhome white.
Yep.
And Ozzy's rehearsing. Ozzy's looking for drummers, actually. So he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Carm, how are you?" I said, "I'm okay." He goes, "Look, I hope we can still be friends. I know you have problems with my missus." He said, "Yeah, Oz, I know it ain't you." So he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taping up this window with brown paper so it doesn't get paint on it." So he goes, "You need a hand?" I said, "Sure." So I was on this little, stools, a couple of stools. So I got Ozzy on one of the stools. I was on the other one, and we're putting this thing up together. And he says, "Well, what else you doing?" I said, I got my band, King Cobra. I started a new band. And, we had a concept for the band, blonde hair, and I was the black hair, the opposite of Motley Crue.
Yeah.
We said we had colors on our hair, so I always had colors going on.
Right.
And he said, "Oh, that sounds good." And I said, we're going to play the show down. You want to come check it out?" "For sure." So he came in and we played the show for Ozzy.
Okay.
Wow. And he's a friend, but I haven't seen him in years. I have no connection with him. And that's what happens a lot with a lot of people,
Sure. Were you pretty, because now we're in King Cobra, were you pretty aware of what was going on with the Hollywood scene with the Rats and the Motley Crue?
Oh yeah.
And
I lived there.
Yeah, sure.
Of course I knew.
And was King Cobra kind of a reaction to that?
Of course.
Sure.
And it was a reaction to her firing me, telling me, "You need to get your own band together." But
Yep.
in the 80s, I was the only one that had a mustache in the 80s.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
I've had this forever.
Yeah.
But I thought about, my manager, he used to, when the Coin Management managed Kiss, he was the West Coast guy, Alan Miller.
Yeah.
So they closed that office, but Alan still stayed there. And he said, "Look, you can stay with me and be a big fish in a little sea, or go with Coin and be a little fish in a big sea."
Yeah.
So I stuck with him, and he was really great. And we did some really great things. We started the drum offs that the Guitar Center did. We did some great stuff.
Yep.
But so he said, "Look, we got to have a concept for the band. A look. Kind of have a look."
Yep.
So I said, "Well, look, why don't we be the opposite of Motley Crue and have all blonde guys, and I'll be the black hair guy because it's my band.
Yeah.
And then we'll put color in the hair."
Yeah.
So he said, "That's great." So we started doing that. When we got money, I bought outfits for everybody. We bought states. I mean, I put tons of money back into this thing.
Yeah.
And it worked for, it went up to a point. It didn't go all the way. Same thing with Blue Murder. Blue Murder, I thought, "Are you kidding me? This album's going to go all the way."
And I really want to get into the Blue Murder stuff. I was going to ask about King Cobra. First of all, I'm friends with an author who wrote he wrote a Van Halen book and a Ted Templeman book, Greg Renoff. But he asked Pete Angelus, who worked with Van Halen, did he direct the Hunger video?
Yeah, he did for Hunger video.
Yeah. So what was that?
He did. Well, it's doing a video. It's just days in a sound stage, and there's nothing. Look, I did so many videos in my life. It's just another video. Now it's different.
Yeah.
Now I do the videos here. I got a green screen
Yep.
where my drums are, and I just do the videos here, you know, and then you send it around, and it looks like you're all together. We did a new King Cobra song called "We Are Warriors." You probably
Yeah.
never saw it, but if you did, it was on TGI. It looks like I'm on top of a building. We're in a subway car all together. You know, it's crazy. It has depth. It's not like just a green screen behind you. It actually has the depth.
Right.
You know, so where are you going? You're disappearing on me. Oh no, there you are. Yeah,
You good?
I had a wrong. I see it. I had a
Sure.
wrong angle. Your shirt blended in with the seat.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of videos, on the second King Cobra album, Thrill of a Lifetime, you guys get the theme, the soundtrack
Yeah,
theme,
Iron Man, Iron Eagle. Yeah,
Iron
my
Eagle.
buddy Dwayne Hitchings wrote that song with Jay Cooker, who wrote "I Love Rock and Roll," and they
Right.
asked us to do it because Dwayne was a co-producer in the second King Cobra album.
Yeah.
You know, we were lost because the label didn't know what they wanted. You know, we gave them a killer first album, and
Yep.
they blew it.
Yes.
They didn't have the right radio guy to do it. The radio guy that was breaking everything went into A&R, and they had another radio guy for all the bands that had the second radio guy. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
You know, and then when he went back to radio, they broke the first band, Poison. I said, "Come on, you kidding me?"
Right.
You know.
Right. Right. So, was there any blowback from that Iron Eagle video? Because in the video, you guys all cut your hair. It's like you're joining the military.
No, we didn't cut our hair.
Right.
We didn't cut our hair. Those were all wigs.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just a video.
Sure.
You know, we went out on tour, we had the same long hair.
Okay. Okay.
And we toured a lot with Kiss
Okay.
because they were my friends.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So the vocalist of King Cobra, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot. But Mark Free
I know.
becomes Marcy Free.
And you know, Marcy Free told me a couple of months ago that she's very pissed off that she did that
Okay.
because there's no life in that.
Sure.
You know, there's no life in that. You can't find a partner,
Right.
you know, and it's terrible. You know, I got a family member, a young girl that did that. Young girl turned into a boy. It's like, you know, you can't have a life.
Right. No.
You know, people make fun of you. You know, it's like. But I tell you what, Marcy Free sings. That person sings their ass off.
Yeah.
Great singer. Great singer. I'm sorry to see that. Really.
No. So you didn't like suspect it, or it just you didn't.
No.
Something was
Not at
off?
all. Not at all. You know, I was taking my garbage out one day in Palmdale, California, and my friend who was a guy that sold guitars to a lot of people, he goes, "Hey, do you know that your singer is now a woman?"
Yeah.
I said, "Get out of here. You fucking kidding me?"
Yeah.
And so I went, I called him up, and I said, "Hey, I want to go out to lunch," you know. And I had my ex-wife and my kids were young, and that movie, Miss Doubtfire, was out at that point. You know, and we were talking about it. And my daughter's a wise guy. She said, "Oh, you know, you have a friend that's now a woman?" I said, "No, we're talking about Miss Doubtfire." But sure enough, when we went to meet him, walked in, he looked like Doris Day.
Right.
And I said, "Oh man," but you know, we stayed friends. You know, I mean, when we had that earthquake in '95, I called him to see if she's okay.
Right.
You know, I still have problems with that. You know, it's always been Mark Free in my eyes.
This year is the 40th anniversary of Ready to Strike. Next year is the 40th of Thrill of a Lifetime. Any talks about re-releasing any of that stuff? Maybe a King Cobra box set?
No, not at all. Nobody, because it didn't do that great. You know,
Okay.
It didn't do that great to want a box set. You know,
Sure.
We probably, I think Cactus did better than King Cobra.
Sure.
But, you know, Cactus was such an influential band. You know, but King Cobra wasn't really influential. And Blue Murder, that was influential.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
I'm such a huge Blue Murder fan. I want to talk. I'm almost done with King Cobra, and I hope I'm not keeping you too long. You've been amazing.
Well, my wife is going to yell at you.
Okay. Okay.
We were just sitting down to watch something. So
Okay. Dude.
so let's speed up a little.
Okay. I'm sorry. All right. Let's get into. I wanted to talk about just really quick about Mark Tureen and Mick Sueda and Lonnie Vincent leaving King Cobra
Yeah,
and
that was bad. That was bad. Because some of the songs that they had on that album, For the Love of Money, was my idea. I was doing that with King Cobra,
Okay.
you know, and I couldn't believe it. The merch guy from King Cobra started managing them and got them a deal without me and Dave Michael Phillips. It was really sick, you know. And I brought Lonnie in. I changed Lonnie's name to Lonnie Vincent because my manager was Alan Miller and his name was Lonnie Miller. I
Right.
said, you can't be the same name as the manager. Let's change your name. What's your middle name? Vincent. Okay, Lonnie Vincent.
Right.
You know, that's how that stuff like that happens. But, you know, I was pissed off at them.
Yeah.
You know, I was pissed at them because, you know, they took some ideas that we were working on with King Cobra. You know,
Did you
I
say?
don't remember which ones, but I know For the Love of Money was definitely one.
Okay.
You know, but
I thought I heard that you say that you guys were maybe working on their song "Smooth Up In Ya." I don't know if that was a maybe.
well, I thought so. Mick said what we weren't doing that. I said, okay, it's not, you know what? Who cares?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care. But they knew I was pissed off, and I had a party at my house, and they brought me a Bullet Boys gold record for, you know.
Yep.
So like, okay, I said, cool. Yeah. So like I said, I don't get pissed off at people. And now Mark Tureen's got the whole name, and I hear he's running around doing Bullet Boys by himself. But you know what? Knock on wood, he's making a living. I don't know if he has a family, but you know.
I talked to Mick Sueda 2 days ago, and
Oh.
he was very complimentary of you. Just so you know.
Yeah, I love Mick. You know, we did the King Cobra like in 2010, 2012 with Paul Shotino singing it. What a great band.
Yep.
Did great video. The video, Have a Good Time. What a killer video.
Yep.
You know, we had everybody in that video. We had Carrot Top was in it. We had the guy from Counting Cars, Danny. He was in it. Zach Wilde opened it up. You know, it was really great. You know.
I want to get into Blue Murder, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll promote your stuff. But
okay,
because this is the channel's called the Hair Metal Guru, and I'm not that I'm saying that Blue Murder is hair metal, but John Sykes came from White Snake. You get you and you get the Fretless Monster on bass, and that album should have been
huge.
Should have been huge. So, do you have a theory?
Yeah, I think it's management.
Okay.
We didn't have managers. We had John Sykes' stepdad, a lawyer, and somebody else, a radio promotion guy.
Sure.
You know, and when the album came out, John fired them all.
Okay.
So I had my manager like giving us information to try and help what to do, but we didn't have a manager. Like we insisted on having Valley of the Kings be the first video, and well, not be the first, but be the video that they pushed.
Yep.
With Geffen didn't want to do that. They wanted to use that just to introduce us to MTV, and then Jelly Roll would have been the big one.
Yep.
But we didn't want it. We didn't listen. We kept pushing them to push it up to heavy rotation, and it wasn't the kind of song, you know, that was a single.
Right.
So if we had a strong manager, they would have told us to fuck off, and this is what we're doing, you know. So I think that's what happened.
Is it true that you guys went like that you went way over budget in the recording of
forget it. Before I even joined, John spent over $200,000 because he had Cozy Powell in the band and Ray Gillen in the band. They used to rehearse in a small concert hall in England.
Right.
You know, and so when I went after the band. I loved the band. I loved John. I was asked to do that big White Snake album. I couldn't do it because I had King Cobra, you know, but I always loved John. I loved Tony Franklin, you know.
Yep.
So I went to England to find where they are so I could join them.
Yep.
And I found them. I played. It was magic together.
Yep.
So when we went in the studio, they already blew $200,000 of a $450,000 budget. We had Bob Rock was producing us, and you know it was amazing. You know, the drum sound we had was amazing.
Yep.
You know, I did the album twice with the click. I punched in and out.
Yeah.
I did it all once, and then Bob said, got a much better drum sound.
Yeah.
I think we should do it again. I said, let's do it. There's
Right.
no holds barred on this album, whatever it took,
Yep.
And if you would have told me that album's not going to make it, I would have bet you my house. But it did great in Japan.
Yep.
We drew 12,000 people on the first trip and only trip to Japan. And then John kind of got depressed, and after it didn't happen, and I started doing Vanilla Fudge gigs, and he's pissed off I was doing that. But I wasn't on a salary now. He had Tony on a small salary, so I was out making a living. I had a family, and so then me and Tony got fired, and then they asked us to come back through Geffen as session guys to do the second album, which we did. Yep. And then he had Marco Mendoza and some other guy playing drums for a couple of tracks, but we did the majority of it, and it still sounded great, That was done in John's house now. He had a full-blown studio in there. And then, that was it.
It just, do you agree with this? It just seemed like the failure of that album just sucked all the momentum out of John Sykes.
Total.
He never did. I mean,
we were going to get together. We rehearsed at his house a couple of times, 3 or 4 times. And it was really great, tight, And we were going to go out and do a Blue Murder tour. And then John came up and said, I think I want to do a history my history kind of tour. Do a little Thin Lizzy, a little of this one, a little Whitesnake, little Blue Murder. I said, dude, I don't want to do that.
Right.
People are screaming for Blue Murder.
Yeah.
They're screaming Blue Murder for Blue Murder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Tony didn't want to do it. Then the last time I saw John was at the 2020 NAMM show just before COVID. And he was picking up an award at the Heavy Metal Awards for Bob Daisley, funny enough. I didn't know they were in touch with each other.
Yep.
And he came up to me and said, hey, Carmine, how are you? He gave me a hug. So what's going on, dude? He goes, well, I'm going out to do that tour we talked about. But Tony's going to come with me, which surprised me. Yep. He says, I got a new young black drummer. He wants to meet you. He's dying to meet you. You want to meet him? I said, sure, I'll meet him. So I went over and met the kid. And he said, so I'm going to go out and do this. And when this is done, then we'll go out and do Blue Murder. I said, great. That was it. COVID, and the rest is history, nothing.
Yeah.
But when he left in 2011, when he left Thin Lizzy, he left to do Blue Murder.
Yeah.
And then we had gigs lined up for Europe and everything. And he got in a fight with the manager.
Okay.
And then that was the end of that.
Okay. Carmine, I'm going to finish it up here. I have one last question and then we'll wrap it up. And you've done so much, and it would take 8 years to interview you about everything you've done. So I'm going to try this. What are the 3 highlights of your, when you look back, like, hey, these are the top moments? And then if you don't mind, like, what were the 3 disappointments? And maybe one of them was Blue Murder. But what are your 3 highlights? And
okay, the highlights was number 1, the Ed Sullivan Show at Vanilla Fudge the first time. Okay. Second highlight was on the road with Rod Stewart, just finding out our song went to number 1 all around the world. And the third one, I don't know what the third one would be.
Okay.
Disappointments would be a group called KGB. I did with Mike Bloomfield and Rick Detch. Yeah. That was a disappointment. The Cactus second album, disappointment. King Cobra was a disappointment.
Okay. Man, you have a best-selling drum instruction book, The Realistic Rock Drum Method.
Yeah.
That was put out in 1972 and is still like, isn't there like new versions and?
Well, yeah, I mean, I updated it quite a bit, but now it's pretty updated what's going on now.
Sure.
And it still sells, not as many as it used to be because everything's on the internet now.
Yep.
But I can't look. I sold almost 500,000 of them.
Yep.
That's the biggest rock and drum book that ever was done.
Ever.
Ever. And I mean, there's other books that are big, regular, like classical drum stuff. Yeah. But I'm right in there with those classical books that I went through.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm very happy with what happened with this book. And, you know, it's a copyright. I still own my lawyer got me a deal in 72. He says, I got you $500 advance, but the good thing is you own the copyright. I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I know over the years I found out it made me, you know, it made a lot of money, and it put me in I was an educator for a long, long time.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I had an education part of my career,
Yeah.
I had the record part of my career, and I had the touring part of my career.
Right. Right.
So,
and I'm going to buy Stick It, My Life of Sex Drums and Rock and Roll, because
do it on my website, CarmineMerch.com. And
okay,
I could sign it to you.
and that link will be down in the description, so go buy that book. I know
Right.
you're still doing stuff with Vanilla Fudge. You still
Yeah.
do stuff with Cactus. We talked about the not the tribute, but the Rod
The Legacy Show.
the legacy show to Rod Stewart. What other projects do you have that, I mean, I can't believe you're still doing all this stuff, but what else do you have going on?
Well, believe it or not, I'm working with my engineer, with this guy that does spoken word. He's a very wealthy guy, but he has a great speaking voice. He writes all these crazy lyrics.
Yeah.
And we're just lately thinking about doing, like I do with Cactus, bringing a lot of different guys in with him speaking on. And then the Cactus record, where all that percussion, weird stuff is going to be, we're going to put his voice in there, you know. So it's an ongoing thing, but
Sure.
we just do it, you know, as it comes along. But it's different, you know.
Sure.
But pretty much that's it. I'll do a session here and there,
Sure.
you know. But so I have the studio here, but I normally don't do sessions for just anybody.
Yeah.
You know, I do it for, you know, Paul Stanley kind of guys, you know.
Sure.
So
I will have your website in the description. It has been an honor and a privilege to have you on, Carmine Appice. I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm talking to you. Thank you so much.
we'll have to do a part 2.
We should do a part 2. Fuck, I'd be all over that, man. So
Okay.
hey, you're welcome on anytime. Thank you, and God bless you, man. We'll hopefully talk
God
to you.
bless you too, man. Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.